So here is my look at the IPL auction so far, and I haven't looked at the best 11s or anything else, but I've just tried to get a bit of a sense, a bit of a feeling on each squad and what sticks out to me. So that's this.
This is the last knock. My dad told me to say this.
Chennai won the last IPL with all-round talent. They batted to, I think they batted to 12 in some games, if that's actually possible. And they kept two of those all-rounders, and obviously two of the best in Ravi Jadeja and Moeen Ali. But they haven't really been able to buy other top-level all-round talent to put around them. Chahar was obviously paid like an all-rounder, but CSK didn't really use him in that way last year. I think he made a single run in the IPL last season. In fact, I think he's made about 80 runs in his entire IPL career, of which probably about half were in one innings. Dwayne Bravo is also not an all-rounder anymore. That doesn't mean he can't still hit the ball, but even with Chennai, he's been slipping further and further down the order. Santner is a bowler with some handy talent. Shivam Dubé is obviously going to start at that price, or at least should, but he's a long way from being, again, a proper all-rounder. And they've got Pretorius, who's had their good World Cup, and maybe he will work for them, I don't know. And Chris Jordan, within the last, 18 months, has finally started hitting sixes for his first line. I mean, basically, for most of Chris Jordan's career, he's had a strike rate of about 118, and the last 18 months or so, he started hitting the ball quite big. So there might be something there, but it's not quite Shardul Thakur and Sam Curran, is it? So that flexibility isn't there as they had before. Rayudu, Dhoni, Uthappa, Bravo, Chahar, Jadeja, there's Moeen Ali, there's a lot of experience here, and we know that CSK like old men. That made it sound weird, but you know what I mean. I mean, they paid almost $1 million for Rayudu, and he's 36. They know what they like, and it's retro. I did actually try and work out their team a little bit from their squad, but it just doesn't feel obvious from looking at the list, and I can't work it out. It's not that there's no talent, but I don't see 11 players from 1 to 11 that just pop out at me. And maybe they're just going to make that up because they do have all these bits and pieces all-rounders, or all-rounders who can do a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and that's why it doesn't look like a normal 11. But it's CSK, right? So we know it's going to be old and all-round. Alright, I actually do have a bit of an 11 here. Shaw, Warner, Marsh/Powell, Pant, Lalit, Bharat, Akshar, Thakur, Nokia, and Sakaria/Khalil and Mustafiza is probably their team at the moment for me. And this is just shitballing, of course, but that looks pretty good, I think. Behind that, it looks a little bit shallow domestically at times, and there's no experienced backups. So clearly, again, Delhi are going all in on the youth movement. And of course, some of their younger players last time have developed into core pieces going ahead for this team. I still would have liked, though, a couple of solid backup players in positions that they could bring in if anything went wrong. But, I mean, everything worked quite well for Delhi last time, except for the fact that they didn't actually win a title. Outside of Akshar, however, I don't really know about their spin. Kuldeep can't be your number 2, I don't think. It's all well and good going up against the West Indians who don't like wrist spin, or specifically left arm wrist spin, but I'd like at least one more quality backup here. But they did pick up Lala Yadav, and anyone who was watching this channel last year will know that I am probably the highest person on him outside of members of his own family. So maybe that's enough, but it does feel a little bit like Akshar, a reclamation project, and a young guy they hope is better than he was last year. Gujarat spent 1.2 million for a leg spinner who I had as 8th best on my board. I could be wrong. I'd have to be very wrong, and I've been very wrong before. But he's not economical, and he doesn't really get wickets. The last 3 years in batting, he struck at a rate of 119, which is very slow for someone batting at 5 and 7. And I know he played that innings, but let's just focus on last year. He had an average of 15 with a strike rate of 104. With the ball, it was 42 and going at 9 runs and over. In the last 2 years, he's had one horrible year and one great year. Look, I get it. There's obviously a lot of talent there, but it seems like a hell of a gamble on it. And it's not just Tawatia that they spent a lot of money on. They already had Sharon Khan, and they bought Noor Ahmed. In their first 10 players, 3 of them were wrist spinners, and 2 of them cost $3.2 million combined. And they also spent $400k on a 25-year-old left-arm finger spinner with good SMAT numbers. I guess we know that if they ever play at home, their pitchers will absolutely rag. They added Giant Yadav as well on the second day. And then they also got rid of Mensahar, so they almost have a specialist spin keeper as well. If you look at their bowling, they've got Rashid Khan, Lockie Ferguson, Mohammad Shami, which if used correctly can get you wickets at the top, attack in the middle, and then shut up shop at the end. It's a good three-man group if Shami and Ferguson can, stay on the field. But it's also huge money. However, you can make it even better if Hardik can bowl. But that's the bowling. The batting is weirder. I think they're going to have to go all in on local batters, and I'm basing that on the fact that there really isn't that much batting talent in this list, local or overseas. At the moment, the three best batters on this team are Shubman Gill, Jason Roy, and David Miller. Miller's become less popular of recent times, although I think he's very effective, but he's obviously not a frontline IPL player anymore. Jason Roy disappeared from being a frontline IPL player, and Shubman Gill is there and thereabouts, but probably hasn't quite taken over the league like he should. If that's your three best batters, that's weird. Absolutely hilarious that Kolkata decided to replace Owen Morgan with Alex Hales. That is better trolling than the fan base did to Morgan all of last year. Last year, they looked like a much better team when Pat Cummins wasn't in it, when he didn't come back after the break. And don't get me wrong, he's Pat Cummins, he's a fantastic player. But with him and Russell both needing to bowl in the middle over, and neither of them being great in the death, I feel like they've created the exact same problem that really held them back last time. But it's quite clear that they're really backing their scouting, as a lot of the players that they'd picked up for cheap before have actually gone for a lot of money now. And so they just tried to, as they say in the Blues Brothers, get the band back together. If Shreyas Iyer has been bored as the captain, at the very least it means that their team is not going to have the same issue that they had last year with the overseas leadership problem that you can have. They did have to spend on him, but the three-man local punch of Nitesh Rana and the two Iyers actually, looks pretty good. I wonder if Shreyas Iyer and Nitesh Rana might both be best suited at number 4, which might mean a bit of a traffic jam there. And also having both of them, and they're both a little bit slower, that might cause some traffic problems within the middle of the order. But if Venkatesh's form from last year is real, then this is a very decent three-man local batting lineup. So on to their wicket keepers, and I'm confused at who actually dons the gloves for them, because they have a couple of cheap options, and I suppose the most obvious one is Sheldon Jackson. And then you have Sam Billings, who they spend a little bit more money on. But I feel like that unless they believe that Sheldon Jackson is the most undervalued player in this auction, that it's bizarre that they haven't really gone with a wicket keeper that you just know is going to get the gloves automatically. Or they could play no keeper at all and just let it all hang out. Lucknow played $1.76 million on two players who, on paper, don't make a lot of sense. I could see the punt on Deepak Hooda or the punt on Krunal Pandya. They were both on my big board, although Hooda was a lot lower down than Krunal Pandya was. But both? I mean, Deepak Hooda was 9th on my off-spin board and hasn't really made any runs in the IPL throughout his entire 7-year career. And Krunal Pandya is one of my favourite cricketers, but he has been poor for the last 3 seasons. And they also took a huge punt on Mark Wood, and I don't really understand what role he can have here, as Holder and Stoinis will probably both have to be in the team, and they're going to have to bowl in the middle overs, which is when Wood is usually at his best. And by putting these huge bets on Hooda, Krunal Pandya and Mark Wood, it's possible all 3 will fail, right? These are not year in, year out reliable IPL players. We know that. We understand that they're taking a bet, but they've taken 3 massive bets. That said, I thought it was absolutely hilarious that they managed to get Jason Holder for so cheap. I think he's one of the best high-priced steals, if you will. He can bat anywhere from 4 to 7, be a very handy 5th bowler who can take wickets in the death, or if things aren't going great, you can restructure your team around him a little bit and have him in your top 4 bowlers. That kind of flexibility is huge. And Avesh Khan has been pretty frugal at the death, so pairing him with a death striker like Holder is just a really nice combo. As far as their top 3 goes, KL Rahul, De Kock, Pandey, that's a pretty interesting top 3, no? They all average over 34. I do worry about them chewing up a little bit too many balls at slow starts, and it might lack some really dynamic, fast scoring at the beginning. But maybe KL can go back to what he used to be before he wasn't forced to keep his wicket or lose the game. Like, just go back to smacking the ball everywhere, which was the best KL. They also picked up Evan Lewis, so they have variety at the top of that order as well. And they picked up Kyle Mayers, which I don't really get. In fact, this is one of those lineups that when I thought about coming up with an 11, it actually gave me a headache. It seems to me the Mumbai Indians just kind of like defensive leg spin, the liner length variety. Murugan Ashwin was number 9 on my big board, but I still like him quite a lot. And that board was quite strong. And I'm not sure he's that much worse than Jahar, and he's less than 1/3 of the price. They do seem a bit confused on spinners though, not prepared to pay big money for any, and they ended up with McCann and Fabian Allen's like part-time stuff. Their whole spin is interesting. As far as fast bowling goes, they have compiled a lineup which can have Jasprit Bumrah, Jofra Archer and Tamal Mills from next season. Not only is that fast, but that's incredibly well weighted in that you have two bowlers who are very good at the top and tail, and one bowler who's very good at the death. It means that they won't chew up overs from each other. And if you're an opposition team and you don't have a lot of players who can handle speed, there's no place to hide. They can bowl very fast to you all the way through that inning. But that's next year. For this year, it seems like they've spent a lot of money on batters, taken some bargains with spin, and the seam is perhaps thinner than it should be. But who cares, right? Just smash the ball everywhere and hope no one catches you because of Bumrah. Baby AB Dior Brevis went for 400k, which is a lot for a player who has played 3 professional games. He might well be the next De Villiers. But for those who don't remember, it took De Villiers around 6 years of being a pro to become the player that he is. Brevis may develop quicker, but it might take this entire cycle. Of course, they balanced that out with Tim David, who the last time I crossed him professionally, I was the Scottish analyst trying to work out how to dismiss Singapore's star. Punjab, still confused me a little bit. Like, Jonty Rhodes sent in a tweet that he thought they did well in getting a power play player like Rabada. And obviously, this is just a thing that you do for socials. But do they really think that Rabada is a power play bowler? I mean, Jonty Rhodes is their assistant coach. Rabada averages 48 in the power play and goes at 0.4 run and over more than the normal rate. Like, I get it, it's Rabada, and he should come good there. I'm on your side. But he's never been a plus power play bowler in the IPL. It just feels like they're making simple errors again. Sharon Khan went for 1.2 million based on one season of averaging 22 with a strike rate of 134. That's more than Rahul Tripathi went for, and he's experience tested and last year averaged 28 with a strike rate of 140. SRK is 26 and his numbers with Tamil Nadu are 20 and 137. And I know his list A numbers are outstanding and that last year for Tamil Nadu he completely lit it up. But 1.2 million for a middle-aged project player feels incredibly high to me. He's listed as an all-rounder, but he's also averaged 2 balls a match so far in his professional career. So, the bowling, right? Arshdeep, Rabada, Chahar and Harpreet are all pretty high on my board, so I can't complain about that at all. But none of them can bat. And I don't quite know how it works unless they expect Harpreet to make runs, and he averages 20 in T20s, but at a strike rate of 112. On day 2 of the draft, they did get Livingston and Odean Smith. And while neither are quite all-rounders, they at least give them some flexibility, but I don't know, it doesn't look ideal to me. There's no doubt that we're going to see a very shallow batting lineup. But most importantly, Punjab Kings took Benny Howe, which makes them the unofficial, or maybe even the official, I haven't yet worked it out, team of this YouTube channel. This is a win for all those people who look at scorecards a lot and say, hey, this dude seems to take a lot of wickets and never get hit for any runs. And for those who haven't seen Benny Howe, the reason that he hasn't really been in any of these leagues before is because he looks like every single medium pacer you've ever slogged in a backyard or an alley or on a beach or wherever you play your cricket. But in fact, he's actually a spinner who bowls very fast with over 50 slower ball delivery, spin delivery, weird deliveries that he's stolen from baseball or have come from his own mind. It's just awesome that he might play a game in the IPL because he certainly deserved it. His record has been ridiculously good for a long time. Rajasthan might have the best 1-2 spin combination in this league. Ashwin and Chahal are incredible, right? And also Ashwin can bowl in the power play, so they can really stretch this out if they want to. And I'm surprised though that they didn't get a cheap backup spinner, to really back that up so it remained a strength even if they had an injury. They could have got Adil Rashid or Adam Zampa or that kind of player. But even so, Ashwin and Chahal, that's awesome. And their bowling looks really good all the way through. Trent Bolt and Ashwin can bowl at the top, so that's great. Chahal and Prashid Krishna will dominate throughout the middle. Again, really good. And then at the death, well, okay, it stops at the death because I've just mentioned 4 bowlers and not one of them is a reliable death bowler. They did pick up Obed McCoy, who they got for really cheap, by the way. But he's very young, and this is going to be his first season. And we've seen with players like Tamal Mills, who are much more experienced than Obed, really struggle as a player who gets picked. The thing is, whether it's McCoy or Coulter-Nile, it doesn't actually matter, right? Because they're going to be on their own, and I think that's the bigger problem. But the top through, Sanju, Joss, Devdutt, that seems fun. Use Devdutt as the anchor, and let the other 2 have some fun, and you still have Shimron Hetmeyer coming in after that. But because you need 2 overseas bowlers because of this death problem and probably because you have Trent Bolt, it'll be really interesting to see what happens next. They love Jaiswal and we're about to find out, I suppose, if they're right on him. But this is a nice little top order, but I'm not sure it's going to be able to bat well enough to overcome the obvious problems of the roster in the middle order, which if you were following Rajasthan last year, RCB took Hasaranga, and I'm so happy that they spent so much. I had him as 5th on my leggy board, but that was only because he hadn't really done much in the IPL before. He's a leg spinner who can hit. I mean, if there were two teams that believed in him, they were going to pay a lot of money. And if RCB are right and this works, then they've probably still got a bargain. But he delivered 6 overs last year for 60 runs. I think they'll be okay, but I'm also not sure that if I was a general manager, I would have made this bet. But the really important thing about Hasaranga is that I told his agent years ago that he would make him millions, and I'm glad that he already is making millions. There's one really interesting thing about the RCB team that I like. Would anyone feel worried about going into a game with bowlers of Hazelwood and Siraj in their attack together? It just feels like such a comfy combination of players. And within this cycle, I expect both of these players to get better as T20 bowlers. Remember, Hazelwood basically wasn't playing T20 cricket till about 2 years ago. And Siraj is still young and developing. And despite the fact that they feel so comfortable and so talented already, I think both of them can get better. Now that might end up being quite important, right? Because Hasaranga might take his time. He's already struggled at the start of his IPL career. It might take him a few games. And Harshal Patel should regress. He can't possibly have that kind of season again. So maybe Hazelwood and Siraj are the insurance for that. It seems to me like RCB have gone all in on a lot of pace hitters. You know, Virat, Maxwell, Dinesh and Faf. There's some money spent on that. But 3 out of those 4 really love facing pace and struggle with spin. And so I would have thought on day 2 they would have had to be quite careful to ensure that they have some trusted players of spin, or at the least a left-hander who's really good against spin. But they don't have a frontline lefty, right? They have Rawat and Lomraw, and they're probably going to have to use one of them or both of them at times. And I don't know if that seems like a bit of a gamble, but it's so good at the top, maybe they don't care. They did actually make a lot of smaller moves though that I thought were quite good from them. Finn Allen, Lomraw, Willie, Call, Behrendorff. That makes this a fairly deep roster. That is a lot of talent for backups without spending too much cash on many of them. Some of these might only be good as backups for a year, but some of these might actually go on to be decent picks considering the money. The Sunrisers did not pick David Warner, but I suppose none of us were particularly surprised at that. In fact, they probably couldn't afford him because apparently they gave themselves a bit of a money limit when it came to picking players. You know, they went hunting for bargains in this. They went looking for value bargains. Bhuvi, Washington, Nataraj and Gopal, that's not exactly T20 box office. But that's a pretty solid group of guys that combined cost not that much more than Williamson, who to be fair, is a massive overpay considering how good he's been. But there is a clear plan here of them trying to build a good low-key squad from this. Of course, they did pay a lot for Puran based on what he did last year and the fact that teams seem to have worked out how to dismiss him, spin the ball away and bowl short. But Puran is still an absolute next level talent. He's young, smart, fearless, he absolutely destroys the middle overs when he wants to. That looks like a lot, but it could also pay off. And because they got a lot of budget, solid players around him, it probably felt like they could take a few key risks in players that they believed in. In fact, there's a few players like Umran, Samad, Sharma and Puran who all have fairly high upsides. But around them is a lot of cricketers with a lot of very high floors, if that makes sense. There was obviously a lot of hate for this team on day 1, but it seemed to me like they're making a lot of smart decisions on low mistake players. But I don't know if they had a great day 2, which is when I really expected them to make a lot more out of their squad. They spent a lot of money on Shepherd, and look, I really like Shepherd, but I'm not sure even I would have gone that high. But I still do believe that there is a lot of tested talent in this team. However, if I was a Sunrisers fan, I think I'd be looking at this squad and going, where's the excitement? There you have it, the end of a 2-day auction for a tournament that is minimising the need for multi-day cricket. I personally cannot wait for this auction to go for 3 days.